Well, finally, the first episode of Star Trek Picard has hit our screens, and I have to say, I was in no way disappointed by this first episode. In fact, I'm going to go as far as saying is this felt to me like the perfect setup to a new show. It respected the next generation and what has come before. It started by telling a very new and fresh story. It was great to see Jean-Luc Picard and Patrick Stewart back on the screen again, playing this classic character. I was really, really happy with the direction of this first episode, and I'm going to break down some of the bits and pieces that we saw in this episode. So warning for those of you who maybe haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers in this review. But let's take a look and see what was episode 1 of Star Trek Picard. So the episode starts off with the scene which we've seen before, which is Picard and Data playing poker in the 10 forward lounge of the Enterprise D. Obviously a dream sequence here. It was fantastic to see Data and Picard share this opening scene of the show. Just a little banter back and forth between the two of them playing poker. Just seeing these two guys on screen again brought a bit of warmth to my heart, so to speak. It was a really nice way to begin this new show, to see these two guys on screen together again. We then get to meet Daj, who's with her boyfriend in her apartment in Boston, and they're talking about her being accepted into the Daystrom Institute, which is the robotics and institute on Earth. And she's really excited because she's just been accepted into this program there, at which point a bunch of black motorcycle kind of helmeted figures we've seen in a few of the trailers in the past beam into her apartment. They kill her boyfriend, and there's talking about how she hasn't activated yet. And all of a sudden she, launches into this martial arts routine, taking out this whole assassin squad of black helmeted assassins that have come to either capture her or kill her. At which point we launch into our opening title sequence for Picard. So the musical theme for Star Trek Picard by Jeff Russo, I like it. It's a haunting theme. It's a very, very mellow, relaxing kind of theme, but there is definitely a gravitas to it and a nobility to it as well. I think it definitely serves as a nice theme for the show. There's a certain melodic quality to it that kind of reminds me a little bit of the flute theme that Picard played in the Inner Light episode. It's not the same piece of music, but there's definitely kind of a little bit of a homage to that perhaps in the melody of this theme. So I think that's a really nice touch. And the visuals that go along with the opening title sequence are really good. I much prefer this opening title sequence visually to the Star Trek Discovery opening title sequence. It definitely tells a story. Obviously, what that story is, I think we're going to find out during the course of the show, because I think there's some visuals in the story in terms of how it begins and the course that it actually takes through the opening title sequence, which I think is going to play to the plot of what Star Trek Picard is talking about. Particularly, spoiler alert, the whole creation of flesh and blood androids, as we find out. So moving on to the next scene in the episode, Picard's got a news crew who've come to his house that are setting up to do an interview with him, and the journalist asks him a few curly questions about why he left Starfleet and what happened, and he says that he lost faith. And so we find out in this interview that what happened with the rescue armada that Picard was putting together to save the Romulans from the supernova was attacked by a group of rogue synthetics. They wiped out the Utopia Planitia shipyards, as we saw in the Children of Mars short film, and that led to a ban on all synthetic life forms. We still don't really know their motivation for doing this. Maybe that will come to light in forthcoming episodes. And it turns out that after the synthetic attack on Mars, basically Starfleet shut its doors. They became very insular, they abandoned the whole Romulan rescue thing, and Picard wasn't at all happy about that, and that was the catalysing event that resulted in him resigning his commission to Starfleet. I really loved this scene with Picard and the news journalist. It really had a sense of emotional weight to it, which I really felt. There was a couple of moments in that scene where I really got a lump in my throat watching Picard get emotional about the events that he'd participated in. As Picard's sitting on his balcony having a glass of wine, Daj shows up and we hear her say the visions of Picard have been calling to her, how she's sort of seen him in her thoughts and she feels very safe with him. Soon after this, we have another dream sequence show up for Picard, and this one is the one with Data in the vineyard doing the painting on the canvas. As Data says that you need to finish the painting, i.e. the face of the girl in the painting, and Picard says he doesn't know who it is, and Data says that he does.
So Picard then wakes up from this dream sequence that he's in and realises this painting is on the wall of his office.
So Picard goes to the Starfleet archives where he's got like a safety deposit box kind of thing with all of his keepsakes and mementos from the past, opens up a vault to reveal a painting. And this painting was very similar to the one that he has on the wall of his office back at home at the chateau, and the one that Data was painting. Now it turns out that this painting was gifted to him and done by Data, because as we all know, Data used to do a lot of painting on board the Enterprise. Data's done this painting 20 or 30 years ago.
Around the time of season 6 for Next Generation.
This painting features the face of Daj. And it's now that we sort of start to get little pieces of information as to who Daj might be. As it turns out, again, spoiler alert,
Data's painting is entitled Daughter.
Daj seems to be a synthetic life form herself, but a flesh and blood one. So therefore, it becomes clear that somehow this girl Daj, who seems to be an incredibly revolutionary android made up of flesh and blood, is in some way related to Data, or has Data's memories within her, or something to that effect. So from this point onward, we're essentially kind of assuming that Daj is in some way the daughter of Data. We know that Data had a penchant for having a daughter. He'd created Lull, the android, at one stage there on board the Enterprise that didn't kind of quite pan out. I love the way these little story elements from the Next Generation are kind of coming back into this series, and things we know so well, Data's history, Picard's history, it's all being respected really, really nicely. And stuff that's been set up in that show has found its way to weave through the plot of this new series, and I think they're doing it in a really nice way. I have to say, this first episode was really, it captured my attention all the way through, and I was hanging on every word from these characters. It was just, I just found myself watching it more intently than I think I've watched any other show in recent years, and getting so drawn in and so emotionally invested at such an early stage. I think this was almost like the perfect beginning to a series. And I really have to take my hat off to the producers and writers of the show. I think it was really covered incredibly well. You know, to all those naysayers out there that go, oh, this is just going to be a bunch of woke rubbish and it's going to be a dumpster fire and a trash and all this sort of stuff. I honestly, wait until you've seen the show before making comments like that, because this show was nowhere near any of these negative terms that people were coming out with prior to its release. I was nothing but impressed by this pilot episode, and I felt it was very respectful to Next Generation and what had come before. So moving on, we get a chase sequence between Picard and Daj and these black helmeted attackers, which turn out to be Romulans. It would seem like we've got a group of Romulans that are trying to either capture or kill Daj, who we now know is an incredibly sophisticated android. A surprising thing happens at this point in the episode, and that's the fact that Daj gets killed. It's like, what? She's killed so soon? It's like, oh my God, like, what's going on here? Like, surely this has to be another dream sequence or something, because it's like, we know this can't be the case. At which point Picard goes and talks to and meets Agnes Girardi, the doctor at the Daystrom Institute, played by Alison Pill, and Picard is asking her questions about flesh and blood androids and how that could possibly exist. This is technology that no one's ever heard of. It's theoretical. At this point, we get a nice little bit of history here which relates directly back to the Season 2 Next Generation episode Measure of a Man, where Commander Bruce Maddox tried to take Data, dismantle him to understand how he was put together so that he could then go forth and create a bunch of new androids. And it seems like Dr. Girardi had worked with Dr. Maddox. They were, on the cusp of designing something like this. It was theoretical. The means by which these flesh and blood androids were being created somehow required that they were being created in pairs, i.e. or twins. So there is hope. Because even though Dahj was killed by these Romulan attackers, it seems she has a twin sister. And we find out that twin sister is a worker on board a Romulan reclamation site, which is in a Borg cube. So what are these Romulans doing inside this Borg cube? How did they get the Borg cube? What are they doing with the Borg cube? What's going on inside this Romulan-controlled Borg cube? On this Borg cube, we meet Dahj's sister, Soji. And Soji is obviously the spitting image of Dahj. She's got the same necklace as Dahj, which is the two interlinking circles, which apparently is some sort of logo for these androids that Maddox has created. So there is hope that Picard is obviously going to try and track down Soji, Dahj's android twin sister. I was really happy with this first episode. There were certainly moments, multiple times during the course of this episode, where I had a lump in my throat. There's just something to the weight and the gravitas that Patrick Stewart has brought to his performance as Jean-Luc Picard, and such emotion and history and so many connections back to Next Generation and to Data that is really, I think, really respectful and handled in a really nice way. So I really can't wait for episode 2 next week to come out. I was hooked right from the first scene of this episode. Just before I go, one little piece of Star Trek Picard news I want to get out there is that the other day on The View, Patrick Stewart officially asked Whoopi Goldberg to join the show for season 2. So we're going to see Guinan again. Guinan will be back with Picard in season 2 of this show. The dynamic in Next Generation was always that interaction between Picard and Guinan. So undoubtedly, she's going to be back with Picard in season 2 of this show. Can't wait for that. Can't wait for episode 2 of Picard coming up next week. What did you think of this episode? Did you love it as much as I did? Were you happy with how the story has played out? So guys, please leave a comment in the comments section. Feel free to share and like this video, and I will see you again very soon for another review.